We're in the Musée du Louvre, and we're looking at Jacques-Louis David's The Oath of the Horatii. Now, sometimes it's pronounced Horatii. We don't know how to pronounce Latin, but it's an extraordinary story that has a real place in the revolutionary history of France.
It was exhibited in 1785, 4 years before the Revolution, and it tells a rather complicated story.
So this is the story of warfare between a very young Rome and a neighboring city, Alba. These were two tribes that were in constant conflict, and rather than do battle city against city, both of the cities decided that they would choose 3 combatants on each side. Whoever won that battle would win the war. On the Roman side, the Horatii brothers are chosen, and they are shown here taking an oath that they will fight to the death on behalf of their city. Their father holds their swords aloft, and their relatives mourn the coming battle on the right.
This is taken from a source from ancient Roman history, from Livy. There were other contemporary sources, but David is inventing this moment of the oath-taking, focusing on the idea of a willingness to die for one's country, for a principle. One of the sisters that we see here of the Horatii is married to one of the Curatii brothers.
The opposing side from Alba.
So she's going to lose either her husband or her brother.
As it turns out, she loses her husband, and then her brother kills her.
He comes back from the battle. Rome is victorious, only to find that his sister is disturbed by the death of her husband, and he kills her because one should be guided by one's feelings of patriotism and not personal feelings about family.
So this notion of family, the notion of personal concern is seen as secondary, and it's hard not to then extrapolate from that some of the issues that are taking place in contemporary France when David is painting this in 1784. And that has to do with the luxury that is loved by the aristocracy, as opposed to, in a sense, the heroism that David seems to be calling for here. You know, where is the sacrifice? We can pull through this together if, in a sense, the good of the state is put at the fore. This is a really powerful idea at this historical moment. This is just 4 years before the Revolution, and this is a moment when there's tremendous unease with the monarchy, and especially with the aristocracy. In France at this moment, the aristocracy is living an extraordinary life at a time when the nation itself is bankrupt. And so this notion of willingness to sacrifice oneself was a very powerful ideal that David is bringing into the political narrative of this moment. Now, it's important to note that the painting was not made in France. It was not made in Paris. It was made in Rome. He decided to look closely at antiquity, specifically at ancient Roman sculpture and painting and friezes. And when you look at this painting, there is a radical break with the Rococo that came before it. This is the birth of neo-classicism. And what we see is a frieze of figures that look as if they might have come off a Greek vase.
David seems to be really emphasizing a severity and starkness. The space itself could not be simpler. It's divided into 3 by these round Roman arches, very severe Doric order, a shallow space created by the use of linear perspective, and figures painted in a very linear style with firm contours and a real interest in human anatomy, in drapery that reveals the form of the body underneath it. And so we really do see David's interest in ancient Greek and Roman art.
David has used a raking light, that is, light is passing across the surface of the canvas, across the surface of those men, so that there's a tremendously sharp contrast. And the space, as you said, is perfect and geometric and very rational. All of this geometry is meant to evoke this notion of the rational. It's literally like a tic-tac-toe board. You've got the foreground where all the figures are laid across the surface. You've got a very clearly defined middle space in the squares that you see actually in the paving, and then beyond the screen of columns. And the columns are Doric. That is the simplest, most severe of the ancient orders.
And the linear perspective will take us to a vanishing point, which is where the hands and the swords meet. So that's clearly the emotional focus of this painting. The male figures who are taking this heroic oath are contrasted with the female figures who are dominated by curvilinear, soft forms compared to the angular forms of the men.
What's interesting is that this painting was commissioned by the King of France and was exhibited in the Salon in the Louvre in 1785. Now, there was a little bit of showmanship here because David painted this painting in Italy, and the salon was open for a few weeks, but the painting actually came late. But there was a fairly prominent place for the painting up on the wall, and it was blank, and people really wanted to see it. There were apparently quite a number of sort of rumors about this radical new painting that this young artist was putting forward. And when it finally was put up, the crowds were so great that the salon had to extend itself so that everybody who wanted to see it could see it.
Yeah, David really introduced an entirely new kind of painting, an example of virtue, of virtuous behavior, of the idea of sacrificing oneself for a good, for a principle that clearly resonated with people and clearly resonated especially at the time of the Revolution.
And it's important to note that those ideals are expressed not only through the narrative, but through the very style of painting itself.